Welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Kevin Kelly. Hi, Kevin.
How you doing, Adrian?
I'm very well, sir. So, Kevin, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a bit about you and about the work that you do?
Well, I suppose if we zoom forward to today, I speak on leadership, motivation, entrepreneurship, startups, sales, pretty much around the globe, and that's the goal. That's what I tend to do.
Uh-huh.
Started, I suppose, if I go back to the beginning, because I'm often asked, what are the influences and how did I get to this position? Well, I was born in a shop, and probably at the age of
Actually born in a shop.
Not actually now, of course.
I was
Don't
going
be
to
putting
say.
that together. That only happens in England. But I was brought up in a shop and a family business, and I'd say from the age of 6 or 7, I've been dealing with people.
Uh-huh.
Even at that age, you'd have somebody that would come into you and tell you their life story. I jest not. And then you'd have another individual that would come in and couldn't get out of the place quick enough.
Uh-huh.
So you started to see the difference between individuals, and I got really fascinated by that subject. What makes people tick? What turns them on? What turns them off? And, that brought me then to going into college. I did a marketing degree, just stumbled over the line. No MBAs, no PhDs, unfortunately, just about crossed the line. And I went into my first company in 1987.
Uh-huh.
And it was a very unglamorous company because they were selling little mini diggers that went behind a car. They'd sold 12,000 in 4 years. I sold 180,000 in a year and a half. As a result of that, I got picked up by a company in your own homeland there in Buxton in the Peak District. They offered me a job off the stand. I was exhibiting for my first company. Again, they had a company that sold 80,000 in 4 months. I sold in 10 years, I sold 500,000 in 3 months. Again, I was picked up by another company in London. I increased their sales by 750,000. And then I came back home to pretty much go to Italy because I'd been offered a job by an Italian who couldn't speak English in Perugia. And I decided, you know what? 3 years after coming out of college, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up my own business. So in 1990, I set up my own business, Advanced Marketing. Mm-hmm. And that's where it all began as such.
Okay. Now, you've just written a book called Do, The Pursuit of Exceptional Execution. Can you tell us a little bit about it, how it came about, and sort of what's the purpose of the book?
Well, again, I suppose it's following on from the theme that I talked about earlier, my fascination with what made people tick and what made businesses tick.
Uh-huh.
And the interesting thing I found was, as I mentioned, when people kept asking me, how did you break sales records? And the only evidence I had of any great skill that I had was that people told me I was so energetic, I was so passionate, I was so excited. Mm-hmm. So I started researching into all that. And the bottom line I've found, and Do is the culmination of pretty much 23 years research in this areas with companies and looking in my own life, was that the people that were the victors, the people that succeeded, were the people that did. So it was the executioners, the people that had an idea and went for it, as opposed to the people that thought about it and overanalyzed. And one of the things that kind of make sure that this is one of the key takeaways for your listeners is if you have an idea at the moment, mm-hmm. based on my research, I'm telling you to do. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Mm-hmm. But for sure, don't do the following. Do not put down a piece of paper and look at the pros and cons of your ideas. Because what I've found, and I can say this beyond all reasonable doubt, is that when you analyze any idea, any concept, any thought you have, you will always find enough reasons not to act.
Yes.
And that's a huge point. Mm-hmm. Because that basically means, for example, all the exceptionists that I interviewed from around the planet, mm-hmm. every single one of them, if they had come to me, I would have told them, because I used to be a feasibility consultant in my early days in advanced marketing, no, there's 150 reasons why you shouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So let me just tell you what do means first, and we'll get further into the subject.
Okay.
It doesn't mean to do anything. It means execution based on two, I would call it, pillars.
Okay.
And to me, I think in life and in business, we've tended to complicate things. We've tended to, for example, idea generations is the domain of mystics, and it's people that are just amazing ability to be creative. That's completely wrong. The two pillars are the following: is awareness and attention.
Right.
Self-awareness and attention. What I mean by attention is if you have a business idea or a concept, you have to realize one simple fact.
Mm-hmm.
You are operating in an attention deficit society. So your strategy should be built around how to deliver quality attention to both your clients and co-workers. That's something I explored in the book.
Okay.
Self-awareness. For a startup or for people that are managers of a department listening to this today, here's the deal. You are the leader. You are the culture creator.
Yes.
You have got to know who you are, because if to forget yourself in the process is detrimental. So, for example, one of the key problems and challenges for businesses isn't solving problems, it's seeing them. Sure. Similarly, the culture creator, the owner of the business, the leader in that department, if he doesn't see that he has an horrendous style, he's alienating customers, he's not delivering quality attention, you are on the road to failure. So it is no surprise that in 2007, Stanford Business School Advisory Committee said that the most important attribute a leader should develop is self-awareness. So
Can I butt in there, Kevin? Because it reminds me of an old saying that I'm sure many people have heard before from their parents, where it goes like, the do as I do, not don't do as I do as I say type of thing. When in actual fact, what you're saying is actually do as I do and do as I say.
Correct. Well, here's the deal, is back to your parental metaphor. It's a fact. The reality is, if the kids see that you sit down looking at the TV all day, don't expect them to be the next Steven Gerrard. That's the bottom line. You'd never guess who I support. But anyway.
Ooh.
And my little 5-year-old is just after getting a Coutinho kit, so there you go. I'll put that from the side. Anyway, the bottom line is this: is of course managers that are in the workplace, the workers, your co-workers, your colleagues, look at you, look at the lady, look at the gentleman in charge, and model off you without beyond what you say. So I always do this at a conference. It's the first thing I do at a conference, and it kind of somewhat disturbs people. But I ask them to write down their first impressions of me.
Right.
And then I ask them to answer 3 quick questions off their subconscious, which is, do they consider me trustworthy, likable, and competent? And the reason I do that is I'm talking about the ability to assess people very quickly. There's been studies done on this. You've probably talked about it many times in your podcast, Adrian. But for example, Rosenthal and Ambady, Harvard Business School, did a really interesting study where they looked at 3 video clips, 10, 5, and 2 seconds. I'm editing it somewhat.
Yeah.
There were silent videos. And the students were asked to assess a professor they were going to have for the following year based on those 3, 10, 5, 2 second video, silent video. And they were able to assess the professor up to 88% accuracy.
Right.
It tallied with their score at the end of the year that they had them. So put that in the context of an owner of a business. So you're coming into the workplace. Who you are is screaming at me because of the link between your physiology and the way you think your psychology.
Yeah.
So without you talking, you're creating a culture that either empowers or disempowers. So let me emphasize this again. If you forget yourself in the process of business, you're forgetting your business. So you start with yourself.
That's a great point. It's a great point. Because actually, I think about that as well, and I think about it from this perspective of larger organizations and, senior management, boards, directors, CEOs, all of these different sort of people, and thinking about it from a perspective of, there's, people talk about motivation and getting people to change and get people to do different sort of things, and they have all these promulgations and announcements and everything else, but yet they don't change their behavior. It's as if they're perfect and everybody else has got to change.
Complete waste of time.
Exactly. And people just look at it and just go, yet another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That rankles them more than inspires them.
Indeed.
Problem.
Indeed.
It's actually digging the hole deeper rather than creating new opportunities and possibilities. And just, when I talk about self-awareness, I think it's very important to throw in another thing. Like, as I said, seeing the problem is the challenge. Like, there's been several studies done on this. Like, the amount of studies that has been done on engagement, where the manager says, my staff are very engaged. The staff, unfortunately, disagree. That's been done many times. Avaya did a recent study of customer service. 80% of the businesses thought they had fantastic customer service. The only problem was 8% of customers agreed.
Yes, indeed.
So this is everywhere. So it's a case of seeing and solving, but there's a few other issues, particularly in the context of startups and people, wanting to develop their business. The number one thing that stops people from setting up a business worldwide in every constituency, and I probably would argue expanding on their idea, is fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back to, again, the analogy used of the parent.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting thing is that I'm talking about self-awareness in terms of just understanding who you are, with the exceptions, the guys that I interviewed around the world that have turnovers from 100,000 to 150 million.
Yeah.
Every one of them knew who they were as a person. Everyone knew, and I talked to them about the influences in their life. But here is a pattern that a lot of people listening today may have integrated, and they need to move from it. A lot of us were brought up on the get married, have the permanent and pensionable job, have the 2.1 kids, and live happily ever after. And this was advice from our parents, who delivered it with real love and were genuine about wanting us to have a great life.
Sure.
The problem is they are, as I describe it in the book, selling the security paradigm, SICKURITY, because security is an illusion.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. We could be, sadly, how about this for a positive comment from somebody in motivation? We could be dead in the next 10 minutes. That's the problem.
Too true. Too true.
The rainy day is a bit of a waste of time. So I want people, and I want the people listening to this podcast to just get a piece of paper and look at all the influences in their life and get a real insight into what could be the source of their fear, because that's what the exceptionists did. They understood where the fear came from, and they were able to choose differently as a result.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you talked about attention, and you talk about awareness of the problem and things. And I have this approach that I take when I'm talking to firms about customer experience, and it's a concept that I've sort of drawn on from pro cycling, particularly Team GB Cycling and Sky Pro Cycling. The mastermind behind a lot of their success is this chap by the name of David Brailsford.
Okay.
And he has this idea where he's saying that most people many firms and people and sports people will go for a 10% improvement here, a 10% improvement there. But one of the challenges that they've found is that actually making a 10% improvement in any one area is actually quite hard. And so what they do is they have this philosophy which is called an aggregation of a series of marginal gains. And what they do is they look at things holistically and say, right, fine, can I find 10 different areas where I can make 1% improvements in?
Yeah.
And if I can do that, and it's almost like it builds on the continuous improvement Kaizen approach, but it just gives it a different sort of skin. But it's looking at things and going, I'm just after the 1%. I'm after the little things that we often ignore, but actually those are the things when you do all those things and do them really well, it adds up to a whole heap. But you've got to have the awareness in order to do it, by also focusing on small changes, then it plays into that attention deficit situation you were talking about as well. Is that right?
Yes, and you've mentioned a few words I want to pick up on, which I think is really important.
Okay.
You mentioned customer experience.
Yeah.
In an attention deficit society where a person is getting 34 gig of information a day, 100,500 words, every 3 minutes, 8 seconds, a person starts a task and is interrupted. The average attention span has gone from 12 seconds down to 8 seconds. The average attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. The bottom line is we're in attention deficit. We have to have an experience.
Sure.
You cannot sell products anymore. You have to sell experience. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, which was interesting, you were just saying about the incremental improvement, etc. That's really great stuff. But there's one assumption that that's based on, and it comes again under the umbrella self-awareness,
Yeah.
is a person's willingness to learn.
Indeed, absolutely, and also a person's willingness to see that what they're currently doing may actually be wrong or could be better.
Correct. Absolutely. And, that's a key area, willingness to learn. And again, in the book, I talk about developing expert status. We've all heard about Ken Anders Ericsson's 10,000 hour rule, 3 hours a day for 10 years and you become an expert. I would probably suggest that if somebody out there said to me, listen, I absolutely love what I do. I love this area. And if they emailed me and told me they were doing 3 hours a day, I would say within the next 3 years, they would become an absolute expert in their field. I don't think you'll have to wait 10 years. So that's a key thing. And one of the things, again, I guess, and it's the most talked about part of my seminars, and I've spoke in most continents and many countries around the world, but I actually get people to do a very simple little, what seems like a silly trick, but it has got huge meaning. Mm-hmm. I get the person to turn to the person beside them and say, to repeat the words I put up on the screen, which is, you could be my teacher.
Okay.
Now, of course, it creates a great uproar in the audience, but people didn't start to get it, that this is incredibly meaningful. And I didn't tell them to write in a business card, did I believe everybody could be my teacher today? Because willingness to learn must come in hand with those two facts.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I can give you two stories. I'll throw you one very quickly. But every single thing that's happened in my life has probably been because I've attracted teachers and circumstances. And one of them was a guy that came to me who wanted to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, listen, Kevin, I want to write a book. Can you help me? And of course, he was aware of what I had done with How and You Don't Know How, my first book, which was a bestseller. Mm-hmm. And I says, okay, no problem. We sat down, we had a cup of coffee. At the end of it, he said to me, how can I help you? And I said, look, no problem. I was only too happy to help you just buy the coffee. He says, no, I want to help you. And I said, okay, what do you do? And he was a website designer.
Okay.
Now, at that stage, unlike yourself, Adrian, surfing was a very weird thing in my world because nobody was turning up on my site. This was just at the end of the 90s. And he said, look, I'll take over your website and I'll redesign it for you. Mm-hmm. So with a little bit of a reservation, I says, okay, go for it. Bottom line, he wasn't just a website designer. He had created one of the first banks online. He'd worked with Madonna, creating a community of supporters online. He took over my website. As a result of taking over my website, I got inquiries. I went to the top at that time for personal development speaker in google.com and a lot of keywords like that. And the bottom line was, as a result of a student turning up to me, my business was transformed because I realized that the student can become the teacher and vice versa. Ego is the only thing that gets in the way of that. And I think that that's a huge issue that you have actually brought up there.
Yeah.
It's the importance of willingness to learn, but the importance of knowing that even the most annoying person in the world, and hopefully your listeners aren't saying me, could actually give them something important to learn. You know what I mean? That could change their outcomes.
Absolutely, and I think it's all ancient wisdom. I mean, basically, it seems to me what you're saying. I mean, it's almost going back to the principles of Socrates. You know, it's where the teacher learns as much from their students, and the students learns as much from the students as they do from their teacher, and it's just about being open to learning and being open to new approaches and ideas from different perspectives.
And that means that in your department that you realize that you have to learn, as Peldi from Balsamiq, a wonderful exceptionist that I interviewed, a really interesting guy, balsamiq.com, really interesting to go to his website and see the style they have. Uh-huh. They went from 0 sales to 160,000 units in 4 years. The guy is a really clever guy. But he talks about learning from the university of the customer and the co-worker. That has to be your philosophy. You have to believe that the people that are around you have information that can help build the business. Right. It has to be a flat organization. It's no longer a case that you happen to be the guru and you have everything. You don't.
I like that, the idea about learning from the university of the customer and the co-worker. I think that's a smashing sort of. I think that might be the headline for this interview.
So I hope you have a few more.
Yeah, well, indeed. I think so there's one thing that stood out when we were initially in touch was you had this fantastic piece of feedback from Tom Peters. Now, I love Tom Peters' work, but he said that now I can retire in peace. Kevin Kelly has written the book I always wanted to write, and he's done it to the point of perfection. Call it exceptional execution from the all-time best title, Do. Ah, Kevin, what a gift. I mean, blimey, what a piece of praise, what a piece of great feedback. And tell me, how did you get Tom Peters? I mean, other than you've written a class, you produce a class piece of work, but to get Tom Peters to give you that sort of accolade and that sort of praise, that must have been amazing. I mean, how did you manage that?
Well, I suppose in one word, do.
Yes.
As I said, I think the title, by the way, it wasn't me that came up with the title. The original book was called Exceptionalize Your Business.
Right.
And I've got the most amazing team around me. It was Adam Wren, my developmental editor, that came up with it. A great guy. He writes for Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine in America. Super guy. He came up with Do, and I went, oh my God, nobody's taken that title. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's really, really exciting. So Do sums up my life, Adrian. That has been my 23 years on this planet. I do. I learn. I'm willing to learn. So let's get to Tom Peters. Well, Tom Peters, I engaged him in conversation on Twitter at one stage, and
right.
I'm not the greatest guy on Twitter, but if somebody says something interesting that's within my domain, I'm more than happy to discuss it. I wouldn't be a guy that'll go on and say I'm having a cup of coffee in Galway, Ireland, because I genuinely don't believe anyone gives a continental, frankly speaking. Anyway, so what happened was I got involved in conversation with him. I proceeded to send him through the book. It took a few weeks. The excerpt passed the test, and then the whole book went into his hands. He obviously reviewed it, and he saw something that struck a chord. And, I'm really honoured by it, to be honest. And why I'm honoured by it is because In Search of Excellence was the iconic book in the late 80s, 90s. I don't know exactly what date it was. And funny enough, he actually followed...
1987, I think.
Ah, brilliant, yeah. He followed... I shouldn't have said... I followed, you could argue, his style, in terms of I've superb case studies with great learning experience from them. It's 2,500 words on each of the guys. You really get to know the DNA of these guys that have made worldwide brands. And I want to talk about exceptional execution in a minute as well, if possible.
Sure.
So it was fantastic to get it. I passed the test, obviously. He loves the book and loves the style. And the interesting thing is, when you watch him speak, if I can also draw an analogy, and you watch me speak, I actually walk into the crowd. I get involved in the crowd. I don't do podiums. I very much create an interactive cocktail. And he's similar as well. So look, I suppose I'm trying to flatter myself by the comparison, but the good news is Jason Jennings, New York Times bestseller, has endorsed the book. Tim Sanders, New York Times bestseller, has endorsed the book. A lot of people are coming on side on this. It seems to have struck a chord because execution is a very hot topic. And an interesting thing, Adrian, about execution, and I'll just go to exceptional execution in a second, is even though it seems very obvious, the reality is, if you look at the amount of business books that are on the market, very few of them actually deals with fear of failure, those key issues that stop most people from setting up a business, from expanding a business. So I think I may have just, in the business section, managed to get a little unique niche there. The other interesting thing, and I think your listeners, this is really what I think really inspirational. How I got involved in the exceptional execution movement, let's say, is that I read the research that was done by Amr Vidi from Columbia University in 2006. Or it was, the early 2000s. What he saw was that 88% of the breakthrough companies in America over the previous decade were the result of exceptional execution of an ordinary idea. They were not aha moments. They were not new inventions. They were ordinary ideas done exceptionally well. From that research, I took exceptional execution and did what every Irish person does, came up with a new word, exceptionalize.
Yeah.
And because it really struck a chord with me. And then I started to build out, well, what does that look to me and what does it mean to me? And the first thing I did was I talked to Emer Vidi, and I talked to him this year, and he said, as far as he's concerned, even though the market has changed somewhat, access to finance has improved and so forth and so on, it is still slam dunk. Successful businesses are the result of exceptional execution of an ordinary idea. And let me tell you and your listeners, the people I've interviewed and what business they were in. You're going to be very interested by this. Asthma Care, the guy has built a mega business worldwide around breathing through your nose.
Mm-hmm.
Balsamic whiteboards he's put onto a mobile, onto a computer software. He's let's say IT'd a whiteboard in essence.
Right.
Blow Me Dry is a lady that came up with the brilliant idea that we need to create a salon where you can go in, get a catwalk model, blow dry, and come out.
Right.
So it's about hair drying.
You're right.
Douala is about processing payments. Douala was considered one of the top 5 disruptive technologies on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Globant is software development. Outfit 7 are the guys that did the Talking Tom app. They are talking toys, and now through their Talking Tom app, they have 1 billion downloads. Unislim, the owner, had a weight problem, so she decided to set up the business of weight loss because she was 2.5 stone overweight after the birth of her 3rd child. And demands about organizing concerts. These are all mega stories with really, really ordinary ideas.
So what's the thing that's at the very, very heart of exceptional execution? What's at the kernel at the very, very heart of it? That you say that all of these kind of businesses, all these entrepreneurs, what have they done that they've got right, and what is it that characterizes their brand of exceptional execution?
For me, based on what I said earlier, it's their self-awareness and it's their understanding of how to deal with people. Attention.
Okay.
That's the bottom line. That's the 2 planks of exceptional execution for me. And the other interesting thing as well is, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that came out of this book, but one thing for sure, most of them are problems to a solution. So Agnes McCourt wanted to lose weight, so she set up Unislim. Asthma Care, Patrick McKeown was a chronic asthmatic, so Asthma Care came out of that. Blow Me Dry came out of the fact that they looked at the Canadian Women's Awards and said, oh my God, their hair looks desperate. We need to create something to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. Douala came out of the fact that the guy had a business and he was getting about paying $65,000 in credit card fees, and he wanted to come up with a system that wouldn't kill small businesses and put money back into their business. The other thing is, most of these had no background in the industry at all.
Right.
And I think that's phenomenal. So that points to a lot more than MBSs and PhDs. It points to passion, understanding the customer, willingness to learn, willingness to grow, getting the right people around you. As Bin from Douala said, he says, business isn't rocket science, he says. It's about recruiting the right people and don't be an asshole. I love it. I think the problem, Adrian, and I think you've interviewed a lot of people over the years, and you may or may not agree with this. I'm probably going to lead you and say you will, but business isn't as complicated as people make it out to be. It's all about you in the context of who you are, and do you care about people? Do you care about the business? Do you care about your customers?
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line. And so it's awareness and then delivering that quality attention. The other thing, of course, when I talk about quality attention, and I want to throw it in here because I think it's something that people like to at least explore. I think the customer as a concept is dead, and we need to focus on building friendships, not customer relationships.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure that I completely agree with that, because I think that and it might just be semantics. Around the word about what is a customer relationship and what is a friendship, and all of those loose ties and kind of strong ties and all of those sort of things. So I won't go there, but I understand the, if you like, the motivation behind kind of what you say, and I think that the nature of the relationship between businesses and customers is changing. I absolutely agree with that. Would I go so far as would I go as so far as to say we need to move it more towards a friendship sort of thing? I don't know, but I think we can draw lessons from how we operate on a personal basis to inform how we work in a business perspective.
Well, let me just say and this is the kind of takeaways. It is semantics, but the bottom line of this is, what do I mean by a friendship? What I mean by a friendship is you start with authentic intent, that you actually do care, you do want to make a difference.
Now, I agree with that. Being actually having care at the center of what you do,
Yeah,
is, for me, you've hit the nail on the head. If you don't
yeah.
have that, then you are in a one-way transactional relationship.
Correct, and that won't work.
No.
And I know it's semantic, but let me tell you, I want to throw another question out there because I think, again, it's a great takeaway for your audience, is ask yourself this question in the context of, if you do want to develop, let's just say, friendships, and that's the way I build my business.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in some businesses, not that easy, but it is easy to start with intent. That's the bottom line.
Sure.
Is the following. When is the last time you got business for your client? Now, I will tell you, like, obviously, I've been asked many, many times, how did I increase sales so dramatically in the companies I worked for? I think holistically about a relationship. So, for example, if, I'm dealing with a printer and he's my client, I will guarantee you that immediately I'm thinking of, every time that Adrian rings me up and says, God, I must get a brochure done, I'm going to say, Adrian, why don't you have a chat to X?
Yes.
Who's my client? And I'll tell you one thing, if you want people to stay with you forever, because all research shows that customers leave, even satisfied customers. Mm-hmm. But what I've found is that you have more chance of retention if there's friendships. But for friendships, I'm going to say two things. Number one, you have to think outside the 9 dots, give them more, exceed their expectations. And I'll tell you another thing as well, again from Balsamic, a wonderful quote. You've got to infuse character into each of your outputs. Great takeaway. I would love all your businesses that are listening to this to go back to their business and sit down and write down every contact point they have with the customer and the coworker, and set standards for each of those and aim to exceed it on an ongoing basis.
So I'll tell you a story of an interview that I did with an entrepreneur a guy called Will Beckett, runs a restaurant chain in London, really fast-growing restaurant chain in London. Their steakhouse is called Hawksmoor, and they have this fantastic mantra, which I think you'll really, really like, and it is all our business is about, is the way that we run our business, he says, is this. He says we go work hard and be nice to people, and then we have a set of standards that we aspire to. And that's how he says, that's how we run our business. That is that simple,
Yeah.
And I just think beautiful, really, really simple.
Absolutely. And that's back to my point that we were talking earlier about. I think we try to complicate things.
Yeah.
It isn't that complicated. It's about being a good leader, walking the path of your philosophies without being an inspiration, people following that path with positive intent. And customers knowing that you actually care and you listen to them, etc., blah, blah, blah. But can I just throw the other side?
Sure.
The challenge, though, in the world today is there is a proliferation of Facebook friends, LinkedIn friends, etc.
Yeah.
That is not what I mean by friends. It just isn't what I mean by friends, because I think it's, as I said, you'll love this, I put it up on LinkedIn at one stage. I says, if I'm linked into somebody, does that mean I'm connected to them? Because they never replied to my message,
Yeah.
So I think that we might have lost sight of what a friendship is. But a friendship in a real sense, in an authentic sense, is that's what you want populating your business.
Absolutely. Now, Kevin, I'm just interested about, not interested, I'm keeping an eye on time. And what I wanted to do was, I think we've talked about a lot there, and I think the book goes into, huge number of sort of case studies and different experiences, different perspectives and things, and I think that it's a good piece of work, and I congratulate you on that. And
Thank you.
You've got some great sort of feedback from some big names as well, which is amazing. But if I was to say to you, just in terms of sort of wrapping up before I ask you my traditional sort of two last kind of questions, what would be the top three things you would say to people as a takeaway from this this interview? If you say, in the true spirit of do, what would you say? Do this, do this, do this. What would they be?
Okay, three things. I could give you 300. I want to throw in more stuff, you see. So the first thing I'm going to start with is, being Irish, we're always a small bit controversial. Don't listen to the idea killer in your head or in society. Get that idea and execute. And be aware that your success will depend on your understanding that you need to deliver quality attention to your customer and co-worker for it to happen. One. Number two, you need to start with yourself. You are the most important part of the process. Get yourself right, get your thinking right, understand your fears, understand the sources of your fears, understand whether your ego is playing a part or not. Are you willing to learn from people, even the people that annoys you? That's really important part of the process. That's pretty much one. Two, that's a long one. Two, without a doubt, I have to throw in probably the greatest entrepreneurial, how to put a tool at your disposal, and it's free, is your intuition. And I've been led by instinct. I would suggest you follow it. And your intuition is a bit like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. One quick final point. In 1996, my intuition told me to write a best-selling book. Few problems. D in English, my leaving cert. D in English, my junior cert. That means I wasn't good at English. Don't worry about the where and when. I had no publisher, no background in writing, but I got an A4 sheet and I wrote on it, I write about this in the book, I am a best-selling author, and a deadline, manuscript finished by a certain date. I was told by 3 award-winning journalists I was wasting my time. Therein, in that little story, I've shown you that knowledge will always give you enough reasons not to act. Sure. I decided, sorry, I'm going to focus on the dream. The book sold 15,000 copies in Ireland. That would mean that if it was the same ratio in America or England, it would have been a mega seller. 15,000 out of copy. So I'm saying use your intuition. And the other thing is very much, be willing to learn. It's part of life. Be a sponge. Yeah. And there's never been an opportunity in life for you to tell the world about your idea at such a small price. Great opportunity. Go for it.
Fantastic. Now, thank you for that. That's brilliant. So finally, I always end these conversations with 2 questions. The first one is, so what's the plans for the rest of 2013 and beyond with the with the book and spreading the word? What are you up to?
Well, we're starting off, by the time the interview goes live, I'll probably have done, I will have done, I'm doing 2 speeches in LA, one in San Francisco. I'll be going around New York. I'm going to do a tour of the States to promote it. Mm-hmm. One of my exceptionists wants me to launch it in South America. I spoke in Buenos Aires last April, so I'll be going to South America as well. And I will be going back to Far East, Hong Kong, to promote it there as well. And of course, I'm a speaker, so I'm going to be, hopefully, a few people will think I'm competent enough to get me speaking, so excellent. I should be in some parts of the planet, I guess.
Fantastic. And finally, this is a question I always end these interviews on, and that is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
Yeah, well, I talk about in business that, people talk about closing sales, and I always say that closing sale doesn't exist. Sales happen. A close is a natural progression of the interview. So I'd like to think at this stage, I hope that people are already going, hey, God, I've got to go on Amazon or 1-800-CEO Read and buy this book now. So I hope that that's the logical kind of sequence of the interview, that they got something out of it and they understand my passion and my insight into the subject. It isn't rocket science, but I've broke it down into a fantastic book.
Fantastic, Kevin. That's been brilliant, and thank you for your time today. That's been excellent.
Thank you, Adrian. Great time. Enjoyed it.